在经历多番波折之后，第25届联合国气候变化大会终于如期召开。距离参会国签署巴黎协定已经过去了4年时间，而实际的减排形势却并不乐观。一方面，各国的减排行动落实仍然不到位；另一方面，全球能源结构调整升级的需求日益迫切。聚焦行业，传统能源公司正在加速低碳转型，其中就包括老牌油气巨头 BP。2018年3月 ，BP 宣布，未来3年将成立1亿美元的基金，用于减少上游油气业务的温室气体排放。同时呢，每年投资5亿美元，加强在电动汽车、自动驾驶、生物燃料、碳足迹、储能和信息化等方面的技术储备。今年 BP 宣布投资能源管理专家 RMB， 这是 BP 在中国 AI 领域的首次投资，进一步推动 BP 在可替代能源、低碳电力、存储和数字化价值链领域的发展。2020年2月 ，BP 宣布了公司新的使命与愿景，提出要为人类和我们的地球重新构想整个能源行业。这一个使命建立在一个远景之上，即 BP 到2050年或之前成为一家净零的公司，并助力世界实现零排放。这是一项在行业内领先的雄心壮志。为此 ，BP 将展开公司的全面转型，并在转型过程中保持业绩增长。现任 BP 集团执行副总裁的戴尚亚负责 BP 的天然气与低碳能源相关业务。他会如何评价目前全球的减排进展，又如何看待太阳能、风能等新兴能源的发展趋势？对于 BP 的低碳转型策略，他会有着怎样的解读？本期财新对话精彩内容即将呈现。
Thank you, Mr. Daniel, taking questions from Caixin from us. And I think the number one question is really about the climate change. In terms of reality on the ground, actually, I think the future is not that rosy, and the people even send some kind of the bleak picture about the less willingness on the part of the sovereign governments to deliver on their promises in Paris 2015. So what went wrong with the unfulfilled promises by the several sovereign governments, and what we can do from a corporate perspective to trying to get things back on track?
So I think when you look back before one looks forward, a lot of progress has been made. The fact is that the world got together in Paris and made commitments, the so-called NDCs, the Nationally Determined Contributions. Now, that was a big step forward when you look back in the previous period. But clearly, the contributions that each nation state has made is not enough. The world is on an unsustainable path. More needs to be done in terms of meeting the challenge of getting to 2 degrees or dealing with even the 1.5 degrees aspiration. So the issue is, how do nation states work together to set the right framework which allows corporations and society at large to act in concert with the overall vision? And from my perspective, I think there are some key things that can be done. Number one, we have to look at what we can do in our core operations. And that applies to companies, it applies to nation states. How can you actually reduce emissions from the core operations? I mean, clearly, if you are growing a gas economy at the expense of coal, you will reduce effectively the emission levels by 50%. That's a very significant reduction. Then there is sort of the application of technology and innovation in products. How do we actually encourage that? How do we set the right frameworks? And then, of course, there is the entire area of renewables, growing new businesses, creating new business models that create massive opportunity for the future. And in this context, we have seen, for example, in solar, China has led the solar revolution. An 82% reduction in the last decade in manufacturing costs has created a vibrant business around the world in solar. One other area that often is neglected is efficiency. There is so much more that can be done to reduce wastage. 88% of primary energy is not deployed into useful heat, light, and mobility. If we can do more in efficiency alongside absolute reduction in core operations, improving products, as well as building new business models, then I think we've got a better chance of meeting the goals and aspirations of Paris.
So you talk about I think the keywords about efficiency. So I think what is the current development on the part of BP in trying to make more efficient use of the already existing technology, energies?
Well, I think if you want to grow the gas economy, you have to deal with the issue of methane or methane. And what BP has laid out is a clear target that says we will cap the amount of methane that was released from our gas operations at 0.2%. We've also sort of said that we will have, around 3 million tons of sustainable reductions in greenhouse gas emissions from our core operations. This is about value engineering. It's about ensuring there's no flaring in our operations, in our gas operations. It is actually about ensuring we are more efficient in the way we go about extracting and monetizing hydrocarbon resources.
Actually, we know you are in charge of alternative energy. I would say definitely alternative energy is a darling for in the eyes of many people. But the question was the new energies, alternative energies that we know it's, for example, about the wind turbine. The wind energy is not as sustainable because the seasonal reason, right? And also we talk about the first stage high cost development when it comes to using these new energies. So how can you persuade, old guards that new technology definitely is what represent the next generations?
Well, I think there are a number of factors, but I think it's important to recognize, firstly, that the absolute cost of manufacturing has come down in many renewable technologies. And the reason the absolute cost has come down is scale is being built up. And governments have a role to play in creating incentives to scale it up. And today, solar and onshore wind are effectively the cheapest source of energy in many markets around the world. We've seen in wind a 225% improvement in turbine efficiency over the course of the last decade. So I think what you're seeing in renewables is a massive scale up, a huge amount of technology that is actually accelerating the pace of developments. So in the meanwhile, gas has an incredibly important role to play, acting as a partner of renewables to deal with the issue that you highlighted, which is intermittency. And so we see a marriage between gas and renewables as a very important part of the energy transition. And that actually, I think, is the first step. Over time, one can see the decarbonization of gas, the creation of blue hydrogen. One can see solar alongside storage, wind alongside storage. So I think, the energy system is complicated sometimes, certainly complex, and not one where you can actually say, like telephony, one day I've got fixed line phones and next day I've got mobile phones, and therefore the old becomes redundant, the new becomes the relevant thing to actually focus on. Energy is a lot more complicated. So I think what we see is not divergence, we actually see convergence. So when I look at sort of our own portfolio, at the start of the decade, we had a 40% share of gas in our total portfolio. Today it's 50%. In a matter of a decade, given the scale of BP, that's a massive move. We have, in the pace that we've been working on, a solar business that today is Europe's largest solar developer. We announced in July a formation of a company called BP Bunge, which will be the world's second largest sustainable bioenergy company, which will actually start operating on the 1st of December. We have announced with DD a tremendous partnership in terms of fast charging. We are seeing a lot of movement in terms of new technologies in mobility, etc. So I think, you're going to see different technologies, different business models evolve.
Next year, January the 1st, China will put in place and enact we call the Foreign Investment Act. So what's your take on the new legislation about the foreign investment? So what kind of messages you want to send to your Chinese counterparts and the Chinese regulators about BP's commitment to China's market and yeah.
Well, BP has been in China since 1973. So we've been a long-standing partner of China over many, many decades. When I look at sort of BP's own evolution in China, it is actually a good metaphor for the country. What started off as a technology licensing business, over time became a manufacturing business, over time became a business which was involved in trading, it continues to be involved in trading, over time sort of had the benefit of accessing a large consumer demand in China as China continues to prosper. And today we do all of those things, but we also have a lot of technology links with China. And so I think what we are very pleased with is the support we've got from our partners and from the government. And I think the new investment law, the new incentives, I think will only accelerate a journey that we have been on over the course of the last 4 decades. We are very pleased with the progress that's being made. And I think China, in the world of energy, I really believe, as we think about the energy transition, is well positioned to be a leader. And that's very exciting as we look forward.